This is the Parra podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Eels Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, Bo Cook from Loan Market, BTZD, the official apparel partner of the Parra podcast, and the Parramatta Times, the official media partner of the Parra podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Parra podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Parra Cave.
And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Parra podcast. Troy Warner here, and yes, look, I did say after episode 259, featuring Joel Clinton, that it would be the last podcast of the year, but look, I got a little bit of an itch to come back on and do a podcast again. And look, there has been a lot of talk over the last week or so after a newspaper article by Dean Ritchie at the Telegraph about the Immortals and how the NRL were going to possibly discuss the possibility of inducting another two Immortals into the NRL as Immortals in the next couple of years. So look, there's always a discussion about who should be an Immortal of rugby league. We have 13 of them at the moment. So, look, do we extend that? Well, look, personally, I think we should extend that one. But how much do you extend that? To be an Immortal of rugby league, it is a very exclusive club. And I think you cannot just keep on adding and adding and adding and adding. I think that's why we do have a Hall of Fame in rugby league, but I think that is a very exclusive club to be an Immortal of rugby league. But anyway, as a Parramatta fan, I think that there should be at least one Parramatta player from the golden age of the Parramatta Eels, which was the 1980s, in that Immortality Club. And today I'm just going to run through, four of the players that I think could be an Immortal of rugby league. Certainly deserve a mention in the rugby league circles as a potential nomination of becoming an Immortal. And look, the first one I'm going to start with is Mr. Ray Price. Now, I must say that I didn't see a lot of Ray's career, obviously live, but I have watched highlights of him play. Obviously, the grand final wins I've watched, and also I've listened to some of his former teammates on the podcast that I have interviewed talk about him as a player, as a leader. So I do have a little bit of knowledge about him. So as I said, I didn't get to see a lot of him play. I have just seen highlights and the like, which maybe potentially a lot of you may have seen also as well. But Ray Price, well, he is a dual international. Now, a dual international, he played 7 tests for the Wallabies in 1974-75. Before coming to rugby league in 1976. So he came to rugby league in 1976 to the Parramatta Eels, where he played 259 games, 6 grand finals, 7 if you include the 1977 replay. Captain 1 premiership team in 1986, and obviously also in those 6 grand finals, 7 if you include the replay, he won 4 titles. As I said, one as a captain in 1986, represented the Kangaroos, the Australian Kangaroos in rugby league on 23 occasions, including 2 Kangaroo tours, 1 unbeaten in 1982. New South Wales State of Origin 8 times, including 5 as captain. Dally M Player of the Year 1982. Dally M Lock of the Year 5 years in a row between 1982 and 1986. Look, Ray was one of the toughest players to ever play rugby league. He was always battered, he was always bruised sometimes, and mostly also bloodied as well on the field. Teams would definitely try to gang up on him in those days in tackles and try to take Ray out of the game, but he just kept on coming back, and he was a defensive machine. And look, if the HIA rule was around back in Ray's day, I don't think he would have finished many games because he was in absolutely everything. And as I said, opposition teams used to target him as well. And back in those days as well, you used to get away with a little bit more as well. There wasn't the focus, there wasn't the technology, there wasn't the cameras on plays, so you were allowed to get away with a little bit more, the swinging arms, the forearms, as long as it's not blatantly obvious, but you could definitely sneak a few forearms down when making tackles onto Ray, and more often than not, that would be the case as well. Look, a lot of fans say that the day that Ray Price came to Parramatta, it coincided with success at the Eels. So he played his first game for Parramatta in 1976. They make the grand final in 1976, unfortunately go down. They then make the grand final in 1977, and then obviously the replay as well, again going down to the Dragons as well. But then the ultimate success as well, the premierships in 81, 82, 83 and 86. Ray is also a member of the NRL Hall of Fame, which he was inducted in 2008. He is in the Eels Team of the Century as well. He is has an Order of Australia medal as well. Also has the distinction as the only statue at CommBank Stadium as it was now. Previously it was there at Parramatta Stadium when it was erected. So statue of Ray, which I pass every game I go to CommBank Stadium, and no doubt a lot of fans obviously get a picture there as well with the Ray Price statue as well. So look, an impeccable player, Ray Price, and no doubt worthy of a nomination of becoming an immortal of rugby league. You'll be able to contact. You'll be able to hear my episode chat with Ray. I was fortunate enough to interview him for the podcast, and he is episode number 53 on the podcast. So check that one out if you want to hear my chat with him. Very, very interesting. Now, to the next player, and a player that I haven't interviewed for the podcast yet. I'm hoping to one day. Again, a player that I didn't see much play because I only started watching rugby league in 1986, and this is when this player, along with Ray, retired from the game of rugby league, and of course that is Mick Cronin, the Crow. So again, I've watched a lot of replays, games of his as well, highlights, and listened to some of his former teammates on interviews on my podcast and also other podcasts and radio interviews and the like about the man Mick Cronin as well. So that's how I've gotten my knowledge of Mick. Now, he represented Australia, and look, he was in fact selected from the country, obviously coming from Gerringong down there on the south coast of New South Wales, selected from the country to play for Australia. Now that's a pretty mean feat if you ask me, and you definitely wouldn't see that these days. But certainly back in the day in the 70s, Mick was selected to play from the country to play for Australia. So a lot of Sydney-based clubs actually wanted him to play for them. Mick wanted to stay down in Gerringong because he loved it that much. He didn't want to come to Sydney, so he got selected from the country to play for Australia. So Kangaroo Tour in 1978, 35 appearances for Australia, which is a very impressive record as well, but many appearances for New South Wales first, country first, New South Wales city first, which is like the old New South city versus country games that we used to have in the rugby league back in the day. It used to be a little bit of a state of origin trial sometimes, so back when state of origin first started, and indeed in the 90s as well, but good opportunity for the country teams to get together and play against the city lads. So many appearances for them from Mick. 216 appearances for the Parramatta Eels beginning in 1977. As I said before, he knocked back a lot of Sydney clubs to play for Parramatta eventually in 1977. 6 grand final appearances, in 7 if you include the 77 replay. He won obviously 4 premierships with the Parramatta Eels, 81, 82, 83, 86. And in 86, he had to overcome a serious eye injury early on in the season to come back at the end of the season and play and win that last grand final victory for the Eels and himself, and go out a winner with his mate Ray Price on that same day. Inducted into the NRL Hall of Fame in 2007. At one point, he held the point scoring record in the NRL at one stage, before he was slowly overtaken. I think it was from Jason Taylor by memory. I could be wrong there. Someone will point that out to me, but I think it was Jason Taylor who overtook Mick Cronin, I think. In 2001, but Mick held that record for a long time, the overall point scoring record in the NRL. As I said, inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2007, has a grandstand named after him at CommBank Stadium, was actually named after him as well at the old Parramatta Stadium as well, where he did do the first kickoff at Parramatta Stadium when it was opened in 1986, as I said, having that serious eye injury. Now, as I said, I didn't see much of him play, but I have watched a lot of rugby league tapes and shorts, and as I said, talking to ex-teammates on the podcast, and especially someone like Brett Kenny, who said that someone like Mick was a great experienced head to have in the same team and help those younger guys during their careers. Always great to have a player like that in their side. Look, great off the field, always has time for the fans, even when he is in a different state. I caught up with him in Queensland this year at the Dolphins v Parramatta game, and always happy to have a chat, get a photo. So doing a bit of ambassadorship work for the Parramatta Eels there, but anytime he's at CommBank Stadium, always has a time for the fans, have a chat, get a picture. Did a bit of coaching as well back in Parramatta back in the day. Wasn't as successful as what he would like to have been. Very tough period of the Parramatta Eels in those early 90s, but did coach first grade as well. And of course, he's got the Gerringong pub down there, the Cronin Hotel. So if you're ever down south in Gerringong, call in to the Gerringong pub and see if you can say good day to Mick Cronin, the Crow. I remember one time I was down there and it was during the middle of the week, so a little bit quieter at the pub, but yeah, was able to have a chat with Mick for a long time about rugby league, about the Parramatta Eels. So, as I said, I'm hoping to get down there and have a podcast chat with him one day for sure. Now, another gentleman that I have had the privilege of interviewing on the podcast, episode number 4, Peter Sterlo. Now, he is a player, he's one half of what I think is the greatest halves combination in rugby league that we have ever seen, although it is very hard to judge that because you have different rules, obviously different players, different rules, different teams, different situations all throughout the different eras, so the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s now. So, but I still believe that he and Brett Kenny are one of, if not the greatest halves combination that rugby league has ever seen. But anyway, to Peter Sterling, he played 228 games for the Parramatta Eels, debuted in 1978 as a fullback, believe it or not. Maybe not many people know that one, but debuted at fullback. New South Wales State of Origin in 13 times, including the 1986 clean sweep team for New South Wales, the first ever in Origin history in a series. 18 games for Australia, including 2 unbeaten Kangaroo tours in 1982 and 1986. And look, the list goes on. Dally M Halfback of the Year, 83, 84, 86, 87. Rugby League Week, the old Rugby League Week magazine, Player of the Year in 84, 86, 87. Clive Churchill Medal winner, so the first Clive Churchill Medal winner as we know it today, which was awarded in 1986. He was the first one to win that medal, a medal that he actually, I think, believes that it probably should have went to Paul Taylor, and that maybe the judges got the hairstyles mixed up and awarded it to Sterlo, but he actually, as humble as Sterlo is, thought that Paul Taylor was the best player on the field that day. So, but Sterlo got the Clive Churchill medal on that day in 1986. Dally M Player of the Year in 86-87, Golden Boot, world's best player in 87, International Hall of Fame in 2006, NRL Hall of Fame in 2006 as well. So, and look, he did play 38 games, I think it was 38 games over in England for Hull, and he is regarded as one of their best ever players at Hull FC. So, a pretty big rap for Peter Sterling, who only played 38 games for Hull FC, and to be considered one of their greatest ever players. That is just amazing. Now, also during the late 70s, 80s, he had to contend with, there was so many quality halfbacks, including, you know, the likes of Tommy Raudonikis, Greg Alexander, late 80s, Ricky Stewart was coming about, but probably his biggest competitor in the halfback position, that was Steve Mortimer from the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. So, look, to have those sort of quality players and to achieve a record like that is pretty amazing, and I think to have a record like that and the awards that he's won like that, with the players that he had to compete against, it just shows you how good a player Peter Sterling was. And as I said, no doubt his biggest rival would have been Steve Mortimer from the Bulldogs. They had some great tussles there against each other, and look, they were competing for that halfback position in rep sides throughout the early 80s and mid 80s. Look, to win a Dally M Medal of the Win, Dally M Player of the Year award at Parramatta in 86, 87, especially at 87 after the Eels won the comp in 86 and then missed out on the finals in 87, but to win the Dally M Player of the Year award pretty much shows you how good a player Sterlo was. I think I can remember Jack Gibson saying at one stage that Peter Sterling was the best halfback that he had ever seen play rugby league. So just his game management and his kicking game probably showed you why Parramatta was so successful in the 80s as well. One thing that probably not a lot of people mention Sterlo for was his defensive efforts as well. He is a pretty good tackler in defence as well, but he doesn't really seem to get the raps for that too much, and that is not mentioned a great deal. It's all probably about his passing game, his kicking game, that are most notable about those. So just the other day, whilst this Immortal discussion was going on, Wendell Saylor on the Rush Hour on Triple M said that he can't believe that Sterlo hasn't been mentioned as a potential nomination as an Immortal, or why there could not be more discussion about Sterlo becoming an Immortal of rugby league. So Wendell definitely thinks that he should be an Immortal of rugby league, and as I said before, one half of what I think is the greatest halves combination of that the game of rugby league has ever seen. But as I said, difficult, especially when you've got different eras of rugby league, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s now. So very hard to probably choose the greatest halves of all time. Now to his halves partner, Brett Kenny, Bert. Now, I had the privilege of interviewing him on episode 7 of the podcast, so very early on. Spoke to Brett. I have spoken to him a couple of times as well, past that on the podcast as well. Always got time for fans, always has time for myself, which is great. Always has time for fans at games as well. He does a bit of an ambassador role with the Parramatta Eels at home games and away games, so get to see him quite a lot. Now, he debuted in 1980, playing 265 games for Parramatta, scoring 110 tries, which was a previous club record, which stood for many years. And as we know, many of them were intercept tries. He was known as the early intercept king, you could say. Definitely many of those tries were from intercepts. 5 grand finals for 4 wins, including man of the match in 2 of them in 1982 and 83. Obviously scored those 2 tries in 3 consecutive grand finals. Could have been 4 consecutive grand finals, but 2 tries were disallowed in 1986. 17 games for New South Wales in State of Origin, including the first ever New South Wales series win, plus the first ever clean sweep series as well, 85-86. So a very massive achievement to be involved there. 17 tests for Australia, including the 2 unbeaten Kangaroo Tours, the Unbeatables and the Invincibles in 82-86. And in 1982, replacing Wally Lewis as the 5'8" in the test team, who was the vice captain at the time, and also in 86 keeping Mal Meninga out of the centre position as well. I think he played second row and off the bench in that 86 team. And look, both of them are current day immortals, so that speaks very highly of Brett Kenny. Won the Golden Boot Award for the best player in the world in 1986, and also in 1985 won the Lance Todd Trophy for the man of the match in the 1985 Challenge Cup final over in England whilst he was playing for Wigan, against Peter Sterling's Hull FC, which many say is the greatest Challenge Cup final ever. So if you get a chance, go to YouTube, type in 1985 Challenge Cup final, Hull FC versus Wigan, and check that one out. There's plenty of highlights on there, and just see how good Brett Kenny is in that game. He's the first ever Aussie player to do that, win the man of the match, the Lance Todd Trophy, in the Challenge Cup final. So first ever Aussie to do that. Amazing achievement. Some say he was the most gifted and natural player they had ever seen play. As I mentioned before, the intercept king. A lot of tries were scored from intercepts, and look, it was just his natural instinct, and he talks about it in the podcast as well, I'm pretty sure, about how he could just take those intercepts, natural ability, his baseball skills, because he formerly did play baseball as well before rugby league. He had to make that decision, whether he'd go down the rugby league path or the baseball path. So those sort of skills helped him as well. He had the ability to play 5'8", centre, and even lock in his later years at Parramatta. Look, in State of Origin, Queensland, the Queensland Maroons, they were worried about that they weren't going to win the game if Brett Kenny was playing at 5'8", because more times than not, if Brett was playing in the centre, Queensland would win. If Brett was playing as 5'8" against Wally Lewis, a current day immortal, then they would probably lose that game. I think there's some stat about 8 out of 12 games or something like that, New South Wales won with Brett at 5'8", so I'm not too sure why not back in the day, with that sort of stat going around back in the day, why they just didn't leave Brett at 5'8" against Queensland all the time. They might have won all of those games, but it just shows you the sort of domination that New South Wales had and Brett Kenny had over Wally Lewis at that time with those results. So, as I said, something like 8 out of 12 times when Brett played 5'8", New South Wales won. Especially when Queensland, the king, Wally Lewis, was so dominant at that level in those times, except when Brett was playing 5'8" for New South Wales. And again, like Peter Sterling had his competitors in the halfback position, Brett had his competitors in the 5'8" position. Players like Terry Lamb, Cliff Lyons, Phil Blake. Look, there's a host of other players as well, but some great competitors there trying to get that 5'8" position in rep football. But in those early 80s, 82 onwards to about 88, when Brett retired from international football and rep football, Brett was probably the number one player picked at 5'8", definitely for New South Wales, and obviously he played centre for Australia with Wally Lewis playing the 5'8" role. Not the 82 tour, but the 86 tour, he had to play. Wally played 5'8" and Brett played centre in those. So when Wally played 5'8", Brett was in the centre. So he was always one of the first players picked for those rep teams. As I said, He's a great man off the field, always has time for the fans, always taking photos, having chats. He's such a humble guy, Brett Kenny. He doesn't overtalk his achievements. He's such a funny guy as well, in conversation as well. He practical joker. Loves to crack a joke when being interviewed here and there. There is a interview just recently done on SEN Radio 1170 Sports Day program with Scott Sutler and Matt Rogers. So if you get a chance, check that one out and just have a listen to that interview with Brett Kenny. They ask him about immortality of rugby, being an immortal of rugby league, and his career as well. So just have a listen to that one as well, and you'll hear how humble he is. Look, whilst many suggest the other players that I've mentioned before, Ray Price, Mick Cronin, Peter Sterling, are worthy of. They are definitely worthy of a nomination of being an immortal. Many think that Brett Kenny should be immortalised in the game of rugby league. So, I myself am probably a little bit biased, being a Parramatta fan, but I definitely believe that with the success that Parramatta had in the 1980s, that at least one of those players should be an immortal of rugby league. And who that will be, look, who knows? But my personal opinion is I would pick Brett Kenny as a immortal of rugby league, and I wouldn't be out of place even if Sterlo got one as well, or Ray Price, or Mick Cronin. But just rugby league, I think, in my opinion, needs one Parramatta legend as an immortal of rugby league. I think there's only 3 immortals from the 1980s period that are immortalised in rugby league. All the others are before that and just after that. So I think that 80s period needs to get a few more immortals into that category, and it definitely needs to be a Parramatta player, I think. Are you with me? Do you agree? Throw up your ideas of who you would think would be an immortal of rugby league. Look, obviously, later on down the track, we're going to have players like your Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, potentially Cooper Cronk, Greg Inglis, Jonathan Thurston. The list goes on there. Brad Fittler is another one that I think could be a worthy contender. Darren Lockyer as well has also been mentioned as well as a future immortal as well. Ron Coote has been mentioned in the last week or so as a rugby league immortal as well. He has come out and said he would love to be a rugby league immortal, and many think that he has a great record as well in terms of playing rugby league, winning comps and playing in grand finals and representing his country and the like. So many think that he will be named as an immortal. It's just a question of who will be the second immortal be named when they are named. So I think the Rugby League Commission is looking at it and determining at the process as to how, or not how, but when they will name the new instalments into the Immortal Club of Rugby League. So look, there's certainly some worthy candidates that can get named, but I just think there should be one Parramatta player at least, and that's much my opinion. So, look, as I said, if you've got an opinion of who you think should be an immortal of rugby league, please let me know. I'll put a post up on social media, just send a comment there, or even send me a message on social media as well about who you would think and why a player should be an Immortal of Rugby League. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast. As I said, it was a bit of a snap decision to bring out another podcast, but I got an itch for one, and this was a pretty hot subject at the moment. So if any other sort of hot subjects come out, then who knows, there may be another episode come out. But thank you very much for listening to this one. Don't forget to please subscribe to the podcast. It's also available on YouTube as well. Please subscribe to that one. Thank you very much. Have a good day, week, and I will catch you next time on the Parra podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Parra podcast. See you next time.